let us begin the session. Good evening, namaste, and a very warm welcome to the ninth session of our Best Talks. I can see so many people writing in good evening. They're looking forward to an interesting session, and it feels so great coming back after a gap of 1 month because we missed a session of 1 month back, and now we are back again with another Best Talk session. So it feels really great seeing all the messages that they are looking forward to the session and they want to be part of this session. Before starting the session, of course, I hope all of you who have joined today and your families, friends are safe, healthy, and fine. The second wave of COVID was short traumatic for all of us. It drained us emotionally, it drained us physically. It was a very traumatic period for all of us where we had to face a lot of problems. And it was sure a period when we also understood the meaning of life, the purpose of it, and the importance of having a healthy surrounding, a healthy lifestyle, the need to be together to get through this pandemic and this COVID wave that we just got through. And of course, still there is, we have seen a decline in the numbers, but still we have to remain safe and healthy wherever we are. So, sure, the COVID 19 pandemic has changed our life, everyday life, in an unprecedented way and has made us very conscious of the vulnerability of our society right now, how vulnerable we are, the lifestyle that we are living, how it is affecting us, how we are dealing with it. So all these things definitely made us realize a lot of things. So, sure, this gap was a time of self reflection, and I hope all of you are safe and doing well. And with that being said, there's this the immediate crisis of COVID that we have facing today has much to teach us about an more existing threat, if I have to say, that we have been seeing every day, but maybe not giving that much importance, or we are starting to give the importance. Many are already working on it. We are listening about it. We are doing so much about it. But there is an immediate crisis along with the COVID that has been happening from a really long time, and that is climate change and air pollution. Climate change is happening right now, and air pollution is something that we have been listening to since the past few years, that how it's affecting us, the environment, the area that we're living in, the health issues that we are facing due to the air pollution, the problems that is persisting due to the climatic changes happening, to the extent where in the year 2019 it was declared air pollution was declared a public health emergency, so much so that it became so adverse that we had to actually declare it as a health emergency. So in this session today, we are trying to understand how climate change and air pollution is the biggest threat that is still there, and is the one threat that we are facing right now, will continuously face if we do not take actions, small or big, starting from yesterday. And when I say yesterday, it I just made it a remark because we actually had to start yesterday. Even before thinking right now, we had to take action from yesterday, work on it. So connecting all of these things, of course, with the pandemic and the ongoing pandemic, everything together made us realize how it is all interlinked, interconnected, and why we need to take actions for it. So, with that being said, I think more than me, our expert speaker today who has joined us today would be able to deliver a much more knowledgeable session and will be able to make you guys understand how relevant it is, how important it is to understand these two aspects, to know more about it, to learn more about it, and act on it. So, I would like to introduce our expert speaker for the session today, Miss Shweta Narayan. Shweta ma'am is an environmental health researcher working with grassroots communities and helping understand the environmental, health, and social impacts of energy choices. She was a coordinator of Healthcare Without Harm's Health Energy Initiative program in India. She will be joining Healthcare Without Harm global team as an international climate and health campaigner. As a part of the program, she works with health professionals in developing policies on environmental health, also assist with development of climate resilient and low carbon system policies in Indian states. She has been an incredible advisor to Lung Care Foundation for its program Doctors for Clean Air and Climate Action. So it'll be an amazing experience listening to Shweta ma'am today. But today we have a twist to this session. Before we listen to Shweta ma'am and the wisdom she has to share, we'll be showing you a video. So we will start off the session today by showing you all a 20-minute video. Now it's sure is 20 minutes, but it's a very interesting video which will make you think, which will make you laugh, and in a way make you think about the situation and how it's all going to go. So the video emphasizes on the connection between a huge number of environmental and social issues and call us all together to create a more sustainable and just world. So, without any delay, let's jump into the video. We will watch the video, we'll go through it, we'll get the gist of it, understand it, enjoy it, learn from it, and then we'll come back to the session and learn more about it from our expert speaker today. So, I'll ask my team to share the video.
Do you have one of these? I got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here, we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource base has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing: toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the US, our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit, because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing, and I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. And maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4.99 wouldn't even pay the rent for the shelf space it occupied until I came along, let alone part of the staff guy's salary who helped me pick it out, or the multiple ocean cruises and truck rides pieces of this radio went on. That's how I realized I didn't pay for the radio. So who did pay? Well, these people paid with the loss of their natural resource space. These people paid with the loss of their clean air, with increasing asthma and cancer rates. Kids in the Congo paid with their future. 30% of the kids in part of the Congo have dropped out of school to mine coltan, a metal we need for our cheap and disposable electronics. These people even paid by having to cover their own health insurance. All along this system, people pitched in so I could get this radio for $4.99, and none of these contributions are recorded in any accounts book. That's what I mean by the company owners externalized the true costs of production. And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers. The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average US person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebeau articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically? Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one. It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing. Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the US is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong, we are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision. So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted, so we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck, so you gotta go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you gotta go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought, so you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again, and we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all the stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate. Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse, it makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, 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 we should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough, for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together. You can never separate those for true recycling. So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness, it's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming, blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government so that it really is by the people, for the people. All of this work is critically important, but things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system into something new, a system that doesn't waste resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things like green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies. It's already started. Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming. Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it, and we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around, get involved.
All right. So I'm sure that the video was so informative. For sure, it was a 20-minute video, but I think that video covered every aspect of how we sometimes leave out on so many points that we just think about when we generate waste and we talk about waste. We just think about, okay, we are not recycling it, or we're not like segregating it, but the whole science behind it, how it goes, how it's actually affecting the each and every step and each and every aspect of how it's affecting, how beautifully it was visualized in the video is commendable. And I just want to thank Shweta ma'am for suggesting this wonderful video so that we could show this to all the students. And I'm sure that this video must have been very informative. But talk on much on this video, I'll now invite Shweta ma'am, and she'll be speaking to you all. And I'm sure that she has a lot of wisdom on this topic, and she's all ready to give it all to you. And please do share your questions on Q&A tab. Do not share the questions in the chat section. Of course, you can share your inputs, you can interact with the speaker, you can go ahead and do that, but share all your questions in the Q&A tab, and we will take up the questions after the session by Shweta ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Judith, and good evening, everyone. I hope you guys like this video. This production was done, I think, about 10 years ago or more. But I never realized that something so important and so many dimensions of it could be packed in like 20 minutes. It is indeed an information, like too much of information, but I think it's also in a format that helps you watch it over and over again to understand what's going on. I know that the topic of my conversation today was climate change and air pollution, and just to do justice on that, I have prepared a few slides, and Judith, if you could share your screen, then we can just go over those. I mean, the aspects of climate change and air pollution, and then sort of discuss what we saw in the video, and also what from a personal intervention and from a community intervention, how we can make a difference. So I'm sure most of you have not only heard about the concept of climate change, all of us have experienced polluted air, but just to sort of go into very, very basics, we are all aware that the Earth's temperature is rising, and it's rising at a really unprecedented rate. The main cause, as what the scientists tell us, and there's no dispute over it, the main reason for this temperature rising is our use of fossil fuel, coal, oil, natural gas. These are the main drivers of climate change. And if we don't course correct right now, I don't think. I mean, we are heading towards a disaster. What is it that we see in terms of what kind of climate change impacts, what kind of extreme weather impacts that we are experiencing? We're experiencing high temperatures. In fact, 2020 was the warmest year ever in the last 130 years, if I'm not mistaken. We are experiencing unusual cyclones, unseasonal cyclones. I mean, in the last 1 month, we've had two cyclones and intense cyclones. We are experiencing floods, we are experiencing droughts, we are experiencing more different kind of diseases, more vector-borne diseases. I mean, there is a lot of discussion and debate going on because of the natural resources loss, the ecological loss. We are seeing an increase in different new kind of diseases and zoonotic diseases, including what we are going through with COVID-19. So the ecological damage and natural resources destruction is causing an imbalance, and it's impacting our health, it's impacting our community. So it's kind of in a nutshell what we are kind of experiencing with climate change. Next slide, please. I mean, these are some basic posters to explain that nobody is unaffected by climate change. If we think that we are privileged and we can escape this, I'm sorry to be the bearer of the bad news. We cannot. Every person on this planet, no matter where we are, and how privileged or not privileged we are, we will be affected by climate change. Our food will get disrupted, our air quality will get disrupted, which is already getting disrupted. I mean, like, it's nothing about future, it's happening right now. There is water stress, there is different kind of diseases, and there are different ways in which our health gets affected, with rising temperature, with extreme weather event, with poor air quality, with vector-borne diseases. So climate change is a health problem, I would say. Climate change is a health crisis, and any form in which we see disruptions, because of climate change, directly affects the health of the planet, health of the people on the planet. Next slide, please. Now, I just want to quickly, and I'm sure, I mean, you are members of the B.E.S.T club, and there's a lot to learn from you. I'm not, in fact, you all are the experts. I'm not the expert over here, but just to sort of go over some basics of air pollution. And the reason why I want to talk about after giving a context on climate change and air pollution, because there's a very interesting connection between climate change and air pollution. So, I mean, I'm sure all of us know what is air pollution, what are the different kind of pollutants. I mean, Annie just showed us in the video that the kind of toxins that go in, the kind of natural resources destruction that happens, the chemicals that go into our product when they're disposed, when they're burnt, even the sources of energy that we choose pollutes our air. So we have the usual suspects of dust particles, of particulate matter, PM10, PM2.5, PM1, then nanoparticles, then dioxins and furans. We just learned about how toxic, I mean, dioxins and furans are the most toxic chemicals known to humankind till date. There are heavy metals like manganese, nickel, lead, mercury. So there is a concoction of toxins. On the other side, I mean, these are all in the dust particles. Then there are gases. Then the gases, I mean, there are different kind of toxins again over there that affect our health and our well-being and our environment. So, I mean, air pollution, when we say it's a concoction of various chemicals that we breathe on a daily basis. And again, this is something, it's so important because, you know, just in terms of science and biology, we all breathe in 25,000 times every day. it's a fun fact, right? 25,000 times we inhale, and we breathe almost, an adult breathes about 10,000 liters of air every day. So if you're, if you're breathing polluted air, you're taking in these toxins in your bodies, and this impacts your body. It impacts for pregnant women, it impacts their children, even in fetus. So air pollution should be a matter of concern. If we think that it's something that we shouldn't be bothered with, and it's something that somebody else's problem, it should be a matter of concern for all of us, because it's something that is interacting with our bodies and making us sick. Next slide, please. Maybe we can just skip the next two slides because they are into details of what is PM10 and PM 2.5. And we can go into what the health impacts of air pollution is. So as I said, it's important to know what air pollution does to our body and how. And it's important to know. I mean, it's not to scare you, but it's at the same time, it's important to be aware. Now, the point is that we all think that when we have any kind of air pollution related problem, it's only our lungs that get affected, and that's a myth. It's not just our lungs. It's every single part of our body that gets affected because of polluted air. The pollutants from the air enters our body, enters our bloodstream, and through blood is carried to every single organ in our body, and has the potential to damage those organs, and are damaging those organs. So, I mean, if you can see over here, I mean, right from short-term effects of headaches, nausea, cough, or breathlessness, or asthma, we have long-term effects where we are seeing different kind of organ damages. We are seeing mental health impacts. We are seeing reproductive damages. We are seeing even obesity. All of it. There's so much research recently that we have seen, which connects. I don't think there is a single part of our body that's not affected because of air pollution. So let's not think or let's not kind of mislead ourselves in thinking that it's only our lungs that gets affected. It's every single part of our body. In fact, with the COVID pandemic, it's also now a well-known fact that people living in crowded cities and in polluted cities are more vulnerable because their systems have been weakened. Their immune system, their respiratory systems have been weakened because of pollution, and they're more vulnerable to diseases like COVID or MERS or SARS. So I mean, and that's a fact. Next slide, please. This is just, again, statistics in terms of what kind of impacts air pollution has. And if you see, lung cancer and lung disease is only one or two of the kinds that we've seen. And it's not the only kind. We're seeing heart diseases, we're seeing strokes. There are also reproductive damage, as I mentioned. There's mental health impacts. There is dementia and those kind of impacts that we're seeing more and more, that research tells us that is directly linked to polluted air and breathing polluted air. Next slide, please. So this is where I wanted to kind of bring to your notice, because when we talk about climate change, it is something that's it's a very big issue, and sometimes we feel unable to understand what is causing climate change. And when we look at climate change, or when we look at air pollution, we realize that it's the same causes, that same reasons that cause climate change also cause air pollution. And it's important to know this. I mean, we're talking about fossil fuel. We're talking about fossil fuel-based source of energy choices. We're talking about oil and gas that's being used in vehicles, in transportation. These are the causes of changing climate. They drive the climate change. They also cause air pollution. And this is important to also know what causes air pollution also causes climate change, because the solutions that we will offer to mitigate air pollution will eventually which also invariably mitigate climate change. So it's important to know this connection. We don't have to, I mean, we can work in our capacities as students, as communities, to mitigate the impact of air pollution. But what we also need to realize that when we do that, we are also mitigating the impact of climate change. So it's important to know this. Next slide, please. This is just for your understanding, to easily understand what are the, I mean, easily relate to what are the sources of air pollution. In cities, I mean, you can, the five big main sources of air pollution are vehicular traffic, garbage burning, industrial pollution, traffic, road dust. We have thermal power plants, we have mining, we have construction dust, we also have gensets. In a lot of big cities, we see gensets. There are brick kilns that we see in the rural or the suburban areas. So these are some of the main causes of air pollution. There is also another aspect of indoor air pollution, and I'm not going much into detail about it. It's again, it's a completely a stream by itself, and it needs a lot of discussion and this thing. But just to sort of highlight that one of the main sources of indoor air pollution is the cooking fuel that we use, which is biomass based, and that causes a lot of air pollution. But more and more research now, I mean, even households that are not using biomass, but the chemicals that come in a lot of products, and again, that's something that Annie referred to it in her video, that a lot of chemicals that come in the product also are capable of causing air pollution indoors. Next slide, please. Well, actually, I'm going to like quickly glance through this and then come back, I mean, tie it together with what we saw in the video. Well, there are always steps that we can take. There are always measures that we can take at an individual level, and I think it's important to do that. It's important to take those measures at an individual level to do our bit to mitigate the impacts of air pollution. And when we do that, right from choosing the product that we get, or what kind of product we are buying, or what kind of materials we are using, how are we disposing our waste, what kind of transportation that we are using for our commutes, what is our source of energy, what is the source of electricity. I think all of this, the right choice over here matters. But more importantly, I mean, I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties of what kind of material that we should be doing, because the list is unlimited. I want to touch upon one fact, and that one fact is that before making any choice, before looking at a problem and trying to figure out the problem, I think it's important for us to ask the right questions. That's fundamentally important before making any kind of choice. I'm sorry about this disruption, just a bit of a shaky internet. As I was saying, it's important that before we make any decisions, or before we make any, before we start introspecting as to how we can make a difference, it's important to introspect on what is the problem and what can I contribute, asking the right questions. And I mean, as young adults, when we ask the questions, and it's important to keep asking the questions, no matter whatever other people, I mean, however the other people find it exasperating or not, because it's our right to ask those questions and get those answers, because it's our life in the future that matters. And when we are, again, just let's look at what our lifestyle, what our consumption, what our behavior, and how it's impacting the planet. I mean, in big cities, and in all big cities, we're seeing there is a problem. There's a problem of we are up against the resources that we're consuming. We are, and again, Annie beautifully put it that, we are on a finite planet, and we cannot have an infinite kind of consumption in a finite planet. Our water sources are drying and polluted. Our air is already contaminated. It's already polluted. Look at where our waste is going. And it's important to kind of, take cognizance of all of these questions, because once we start sort of making ourselves aware by asking these questions, where are we getting our water? Where are we getting our food? What is, where is our waste going? What is the choice of, what is the mode of transport I'm using to go out? Or when there were schools, now everything is online, but when we were going to schools, how were we commuting to school? These questions help us introspect and understand where the problem is. And that is very important before we start finding solutions to these problems. And I think that's the first step that we need to take before we even start jumping into figuring out the solutions. Because if we don't do this analysis in advance, then we will fall prey to false solutions. And that's another thing, because it will make you feel good, but it is actually not a solution that really solves your crisis. I mean, in the sphere of air pollution, we've been seeing a lot of these kind of false solutions. The most popular one in my, which something that I really find it surprising that it's being touted as a solution, are the smog towers, for example, which the government is proposing, not just in Delhi, but in a couple of other cities that's coming up. Now, we are not talking about the source of the problem. We are trying to kind of, pretend that we are trying to clean up the air by setting up these kind of engineering units, and we think that everything is going to be fine. But that's not a solution, and that's not a solution, because if you actually think, an analogy to this is that if the tap is running but overflowing, will you turn back or will you change the bucket? And that's the same thing that we need to think in terms of whatever solutions that we are trying to work on or incorporate in our lives. We have, and that's why introspection into questioning everything and every choice and every option that is offered to us or that we make becomes very important. Asking questions and asking the right questions is a fundamental right. And as students, as young adults and the future inhabitants of this present and future inhabitants of this planet, it's absolutely important that we ask the right questions. So I'm going to maybe the last slide, because that's my favorite slide, and it's a painting, and it very beautifully kind of narrates what air pollution and what happens with air pollution and the solutions that we look for air pollution and how it benefits the planet. So maybe we can show that slide, and I'm there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Uh, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. I mean, it beautifully linked with the video and the PPT. I think both linked up together. I'm sure that the students were able to see and connect with the points that how climate change and air pollution is affecting us. And let's just, since we have a time crunch right now, we'll just try to take up two questions right now. So one question that I saw in the Q&A tab was, why isn't there a law to not use these toxins if they are this harmful? So basically, the kids are asking if we already know that these particular toxins are harmful. So is there any law, or why is there not any law that is not being implemented, or are we not aware about it that it's there? So it's just a question that has came up from the students.
Well, that's a very important question. That's a very interesting question. It's an interesting introspection. But but the reality also is that there are laws, and there are powerful corporations that twist those laws in their favor, for profits rather than for the benefit of the society or community or the environment or the health of people. And I mean, that's the reality that we live in. Those who are powerful misuse or often violate the law without any consequences. those who are not privileged enough get punished for even something that they have not, something that's not even wrong. And that's the unfortunate reality. And I mean, it's absolutely necessary in the times that we live in, that our laws have to be to protect the environment, to protect the public health. That's what we should aspire for. That's what laws are for. But unfortunately, it's being misused. And again, to sort of take it back to the video, if you see the government and the corporations and the representation of government and corporations in the video, you see that the governments, which is supposed to be for the people, unfortunately, in most cases ends up serving the corporation, and vice versa. So it's basically powerful people misusing the law. So there are laws, they're not being implemented.
Yes, thank you so much for answering the question, ma'am. So we'll take one more question. So this question, apart from the Q&A tab, I have also been receiving this question quite multiple times that, ma'am, we do take steps on our end and we want to, ask other people to also take these steps, but sometimes we fail to do so even after, talking to them multiple times. So sometimes the alternatives can be a bit tough to change the way they're doing it. So switching up to some other resource form is going to be difficult. But the students are also saying that we are changing on our part and we want to bring a change, but sometimes it's proving as a challenge. So this is one question that is pertaining. So from your experience, if you may be able to just let the kids know how they can go ahead and continue to speak up for what they believe in.
See, I think the key over here is not to give up. As simple as that. Because we have no other option. The day we give up, that's the end of everything. So just for our own survival, and just for the survival of this planet and our communities, we cannot afford to give up. I mean, I know it's challenging. There's a lot of mess that we have created. I mean, including my generation, and I'm really sorry. That's all I can say. But at the same time, there is an opportunity. There is a newfound determination that we are seeing, especially among young adults and young people, and that is important. But at the same time, we just cannot afford to give up. We have to be persistent, and in the history has shown us that when you are persistent and you are on the right path, you will emerge victorious. So I mean, we have no option. I mean, yes, people will come up with alternatives. They will come up with kind of deflecting you, putting the blame on something else. There were all sorts of arguments, and all sorts of challenges will be thrown at you. But we just have to continue on the path, and we just have to. We cannot afford to give up.
Absolutely, ma'am. I think that's a wonderful way to end our section, actually, saying that we don't have an option. And it was something that no matter what, we have to take up, we have to talk about till the time we see a change. So I just want to end the session with that beautiful lines. And I just want to take a minute and thank Shweta ma'am for joining in and sharing such wonderful words and letting us know what are the connections. So from starting from the video suggestion, the video itself had a beautiful message. Sure, it was a long video, but then I felt like I was able to learn a lot of things from those videos, and I'm so glad that I saw that video and I could see the comment section where students were saying that it was a really informative video. And along with that, when the presentation was there, we were able to link it up well. So it was a really amazing presentation and a video, and all combined together, ma'am. It was a wonderful session. Thank you so much for connecting the climate change aspect and air pollution, and making these students understand that why is it important to understand these things, why is it important to take action, and how is it impacting them, the environment as in whole. I mean, we all coexist, and how we need to understand if it's affecting human health, it's equally affecting the entire ecosystem as well. So thank you so much once again for taking out time and interacting with all of our students, and I'm sure they all thank you so much for joining and sharing in your inputs, ma'am. So with that being said, I want to thank each one of you to joining for the session. I could see the enthusiasm in the chat box. when you are seeing the video, you're trying to understand the knowledge, you're trying to understand the concept. And so it shows the kind of enthusiasm you want to do in this sector, and you want to take up the steps. So I just want to thank my team here at Lung Care Foundation for making this webinar happen. There's a lot of back end work that goes in. So I want to thank Raji sir, Matrushri ma'am, Ashok sir, Dr. Gagan, Siddharth, Sanjay, Hamid, Neha, Kritika, for all the support that they've given me. For most of all, thank you so much to all of you for joining in and listening to all these things and understanding the importance of these things. You will all receive the link to the feedback form. Please fill the feedback form so that you receive the e-certificate within this week. We'll share the e-certificates by this Saturday. So please make sure that you fill in the feedback form, not just for e-certificate, but also share your feedbacks of the session. What did you like about it? What are your comments on it? What are the things that you learned from this session? Please do share it with us, and we'll be sharing your e-certificates. So with that being said, I'll just end my remarks by saying that the planet will not wait, and this pandemic has sure shown us that how we all have together surpass this phase where we have struggled a lot. So I am sure that when we work together, we'll be able to mitigate the problem of climate change and air pollution as well. So I hope that you all take baby steps from today onwards, and you'll sure talk about this with others as well. With that being said, we'll end the session today. We'll be informing you about the next session. So stay safe, stay happy. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Thank you.